For this story, you definitely want to stick around till the end because there's so many massive twists that happen along the way, and the less you know now, the better. And I'm telling you right now, this story is like no other story I've ever heard of, and I've been consuming true crime for years. So, without yapping on, we're just gonna get right into it. Hey, my name's Yasmin, and I tell stories about topics that are scary, disturbing, or true crime. So if you'd like to, then please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up. And I just want to let you know that I do have a cold at the moment, so if I sound a little bit nasally, that's why. But anyway, we will get into the rest of this video. The story takes place in Utah, and it starts in 1995, and this is when Rachel was 22 years old. So Rachel was just a young gal and she was living with her family, and the reason why she was living with her family at this time is because she was going through a very turbulent divorce. So she wasn't really ready to branch out, live on her own, or live with flatmates for that matter. She just wanted to, concentrate on her mental health, which is completely fine. At this time, though, she met somebody called Janie, and Janie was 26 years old. Janie was living on her own. She was very financially stable. She worked full-time in an office. She'd been doing this for years. Rachel and Janie were like complete opposites though. So Rachel was this really outgoing person. She had heaps of friends. She was super social. And Janie, on the other hand, was very reserved and a bit more introverted and didn't really mix and mingle with a lot of people, which is fine. But them being so different from each other meant that they got along like a house on fire, really. They became best friends, and I mean like super tight. So when this happened, Janie asked Rachel whether she would move in with her, and Rachel was like, of course, I feel very comfortable with you. I'd be happy to be your flatmate. So they moved into one house together, and Rachel was pretty content with her life at this point. She was working as a paramedic, she loved her job, got along with her best friend Janie, and Rachel was still very social. So Rachel would go out. Ooh. I don't know what happened to my voice, hold on. Alright. Rachel would go out quite a lot with her friends, and she'd often invite Janie as well. When she invited Janie, she really tried to get her into her friendship group, but Janie wasn't really having a bar of it. She just wasn't into that sort of thing. Rachel's friends were also noticing that Janie was very possessive over her best friend. She was very jealous as well, especially when other guys would talk to Rachel. And people started to think, maybe Janie has some romantic feelings towards her best friend, but Rachel was adamant that they were just good friends, like their relationship was completely platonic. So Rachel and Janie got along so well that even 15 years down the track, in 2010, they were still living together as flatmates, I think, in the same house. I don't know many people that would live with their best friend for so long. You start to clash after a while, but not these two. In the year 2010, things changed so much for Rachel. There were two major life events that happened. The first being she had a slipped disc in her back, which meant that she couldn't actually work as a paramedic anymore. And the reason for this is because she was physically unable to do her job. So she had no income, which meant she couldn't pay for rent or any expenses. But luckily, Janie was a fabulous friend. She was like, don't worry about it, I've got you covered. I'll do the cooking, cleaning, pay for rent, everything. She basically looked after Rachel, which is crazy because, that's such a special thing to have a friend do that for you. The second thing that happened in her life was she found out she was pregnant. The father of the child just wanted nothing to do with the child. He was very transparent from the beginning, and Rachel was very accepting of this. That was completely fine. During the birth of her son Ryder, she actually ended up suffering a herniated disc in her spine, which she actually needed surgery for quite soon after. So at this point, she had a newborn, she was recovering from surgery, she had no income, and Janie was doing everything. She was looking after Ryder, she was looking after Rachel, and the household. She was amazing. She was helping out so much and really went above and beyond. Rachel really recognized this as well, And she sort of thought, my health is not too good. So she took out a life insurance policy under her name. And this life insurance policy was for $1 million. And the reason why she did this is because if anything ever happened to her because of her poor health, Ryder would be looked after. And it was also particularly important for her to do this because Ryder was later diagnosed with autism. So he was going to need a little bit more aid throughout his life. She, of course, made Janie the beneficiary of this life insurance policy and listed Janie as the legal guardian if anything ever happened to Rachel. Janie was so close with Ryder that she would take him to school. She had like a relationship with all his teachers, the principal, all the like little kid friends and everything. Like Janie was so involved in Ryder's life. And one day, Rachel actually ended up dropping off Ryder with Janie. And she noticed that people would just assume that Janie was Ryder's mum. And this really rubbed Rachel the wrong way. Like, Janie wasn't correcting anyone either. Like, people would just ignore Rachel and they'd just talk to Janie as if Ryder was her son. And Rachel really didn't like this. She was kind of like, this is my son. But I think she felt so grateful for what Janie had done. She didn't really make a big deal about this at the time, but it definitely struck her as being a little bit odd. By 2018, Rachel had undergone so many surgeries. I think it was around 7. So the recovery time for all of these surgeries is extremely long because it's a back surgery and you have to be quite immobile afterwards. So it was just another day at home. Rachel was chilling out, trying to recover, trying to get back on her feet. And she went out to the letterbox. She got some letters out of the letterbox and she saw that there was one that was addressed to her. So she opened it up because it looked official. So she was like, what could this even be? And the letter stated that Janie was suing Rachel for custody over Ryder. Completely out of the blue. This issue had never come up before in the past. And Rachel was so confused, understandably. The first thing she did was, I think what everyone would do, is she called Janie and she was like, I just received this letter in the letterbox. Like, what's this about? There must be some sort of mistake. But Janie, all she said was, she just acknowledged it. She just said, yes. And then she hung up the phone. And Rachel was like, what is going on? So she called the police and she was like, hey, like my best friend is suing me for custody of my child. And the police were like, oh, actually, there's more information we need to tell you. She's also filed a restraining order against you. And this was just insult to injury. Rachel was just like, why is this happening to me? Why am I getting a restraining order against me? And the police basically explained that Janie told them that Rachel was a drug addict, specifically addicted to opiates. She purposely left out the fact that Rachel had gone through these surgeries and that she was in a lot of pain without these medications and just made it sound like she had this problem. So because of this, Rachel had to actually move out of the house because of the restraining order. And she did. I think she moved to like a motel or something for 10 days without her son. Ryder is like still living with with Janie at this point. And after 10 days, the police contacted her. They sort of did an investigation and they found out that Rachel had a legitimate reason for having these opiates on hand because they realized she'd gone through all these surgeries. So Rachel went, immediately collected her child, Ryder, and they went to a shelter. And in this shelter, they spent about 6 weeks there. But it was really, really tough on Ryder because Ryder had autism and it was this sudden change in atmosphere that he was just not used to. And the whole time he was just begging Rachel to go home and see Janie. But Rachel was like, nah, we're not going back there because, this chick's crazy. But 6 weeks passed and, everyone's emotions settled down a little bit. And Janie called Rachel out of the blue. And she basically said, I'm sorry for what I've done, fully apologized, and invited Rachel and Ryder back to her house to live with them. And guess what Rachel said? She said yes. She said she will move back into the house. probably because Ryder really wanted to go back, and Rachel was very forgiving as well. So she moved back into the house, which is crazy to me. At this point, everything was swept under the rug. About a year had passed, and Rachel had to go in for yet another surgery. After the surgery, Janie again was taking care of Rachel. She was also in charge of changing her dressing, and the dressing was just behind her neck, so like on the back, so Rachel couldn't really do it herself. And it was very normal that Janie would do this sort of stuff for her. She'd give her medication and everything too. And Janie it was just like any other dressing. She just uncovered it. She told Rachel everything looks really good. She just rubbed something on it and then redressed it and closed it. But a few days went by and Rachel started complaining that there was this pain radiating from the back of her neck, like so bad. She'd never had this before after any of the surgeries. And things started going really, really swollen, like at the back of her neck. And it started to get to the front of her neck as well, so much so that the swelling was starting to compress her throat and she couldn't really breathe properly. So she went to her GP and just to, have a look and see what's going on because it felt like it was infected. The GP opened up the dressing and they described the incision as looking like blue cheese. That's how badly infected this incision was. In fact, the GP was so concerned that they actually called an ambulance to the practice to take Rachel straight to hospital to get this incision cleaned and for her to start antibiotics. The doctors took a culture, they took a swab of the area to see what sort of bacteria was causing such a severe infection, and the results came back as MRSA. So MRSA is a very severe staph infection, and the reason why it's so severe is because it's resistant to basically all antibiotics. I think there's some really hardcore antibiotics that it's sensitive to, and they're the only ones that can treat it, but it's really nasty, and people don't really get MRSA unless they've been in a hospital. It's very commonly, not commonly transmitted there, but you're more likely to get it if you've been admitted to hospital recently. That's what she had. They gave her some really strong IV antibiotics, and Rachel was completely fine after a couple of days. But it was a really scary experience because she could actually die from this. She could get sepsis and die if that antibiotic didn't work. But regardless, she was all good. She moved back home and things were going perfectly. Rachel had fully recovered by this point, and one thing that her and Janie liked to do when they were both feeling up to it was they watched some true crime documentaries together. And they really liked doing this because they'd discuss the cases together, and it was just something that they found interesting. And on one occasion, they watched an episode where this woman murdered her husband by poisoning him with antifreeze. Rachel made this comment saying, why would she use antifreeze? Because this antifreeze comes up in autopsies and it's very obvious that someone's murdered them. And Janie was sort of I don't know what you mean, what would be the other alternative? And Rachel said something like insulin would not be detectable in an autopsy because your body produces insulin naturally. But also if you have too much insulin in your blood, for example, if you inject it, then it can kill you. Very quickly, I'm just going to go through what insulin actually does so that it makes more sense. After you eat a meal, your body releases that sugar in the meal into your bloodstream. For your cells in your body to absorb that sugar, you need insulin, and it attaches to your cells and it acts like a little channel that allows all the sugar to get into your cells so that you can make energy out of it. If you have too much insulin, then more sugar goes into the cells, and it means that the blood doesn't have much sugar left in it. This leads to something called hypoglycemia, which is very dangerous. It can cause a coma, or you can even die from it. A lot of the time you can get hypoglycemic if you inject insulin, like if you have type 1 diabetes and you inject insulin, or if you're an insulin dependent type 2 diabetic, then you can have this hypoglycemia, and it can cause death, but not detectable on autopsy because it's something that your body naturally has in it anyway, so it wouldn't come up as a poison necessarily. A couple of months went by, and this documentary was completely forgotten about. It wasn't really a significant event for Rachel, and she actually ended up waking up in hospital one night. She sort of asked everyone what's going on, like she felt completely fine. In terms of her general health, she was fine. She just had these back issues and she was recovering from surgeries. That's all she had. So she wasn't a diabetic. The hospital was completely baffled by what was actually going on because they said the reason why she got admitted is because she had dangerously low blood sugar levels. She was actually dying that night and they had no idea what was causing this. They said like she's got no illnesses to indicate that this should happen in the first place. So she was treated for a few days, I believe, and she was under observation, and she never had any of these severe hypoglycemic attacks again. She was discharged and ready to go home. Rachel was discharged, she went home, and she was feeling completely fine. A couple of nights went by, and Rachel woke up in hospital again for the same reason, very low blood sugar levels. This time they were so low that Janie actually ended up calling Rachel's sister to come to the hospital because she said, things aren't really looking good. And Janie was acting very strange, and Rachel's sister really noticed this. So she said that Janie just had this blank expression on her face, like she just didn't care about anything, and she was just acting very cold and distant from everyone. But they found out that Rachel was actually going to be okay. They managed to stabilize her, and she didn't really have any more of these blood sugar lows, but it was still unexplained. When Janie found this out, she almost seemed like she was disappointed, and Rachel's sister really picked up on this. But nonetheless, she didn't say anything because she was like, it's people sort of process things in their own time and in their own way. So you can't really judge people on this. The doctors were getting suspicious though, and they were not suspicious of anyone but Rachel. They started to think that Rachel was doing this to herself to get attention, and they thought that she was actually injecting herself with insulin. But Rachel was asked about this, and she basically said she hadn't even thought of it. Why would she be doing this to herself? She'd been spending years in and out of hospital. Why would she want to spend another night in hospital when she doesn't need to? Like, it's not a nice place to be. Nevertheless, they discharged Rachel back to her home, and Rachel was actually so scared that this was going to happen again that she would eat spoonfuls of sugar at night before she went to bed so that she wouldn't have a hypoglycemic attack again. But it wasn't long until Rachel had to be admitted back to hospital, but this time for another infection in her neck. And they cultured it this time, and it came back as E. coli. So E. coli is a lot more common than MRSA, and I guess you can sort of guess where people find E. coli, but it's very treatable. So they treated it, they cleaned the incision, it was all fine, she was discharged. But after all of these hospital admissions, in and out for months and months, Rachel was finally back on her feet. But she noticed that there was something bothering Janie. Janie seemed very off, she seemed very distant. And she also noticed that Janie wasn't really looking after Ryder the same way that she used to. She used to be very careful with Ryder, but now she noticed that Ryder would actually be in potentially dangerous situations, and Janie would be doing nothing to protect him. So she must have had a feeling that something was off. So instead, she changed her life insurance policy and she put her dad down as the beneficiary. For some reason, I don't know why, but she ended up telling Janie that she changed the beneficiary from her to her dad. And this just made things a little bit worse at home. Janie seemed even more distant. By December of 2019, an FBI agent detected that someone was trying to order something super suspicious off the dark web. This suspicious substance was a biological weapon of mass destruction, which was VRSA. VRSA is very similar to MRSA, where it's resistant to a whole bunch of antibiotics, but it's even more resistant to more antibiotics than MRSA. So the antibiotic that was used to treat Rachel when she had the MRSA would not have worked for the VRSA. So this means that if this got out into the community, it would really wreak havoc. Like, it's not a good thing. You don't want this in the community. That's why it was picked up. They found that this order was placed as an urgent order, or like an overnight order, and they found which PO box it was going to be delivered to. So they intercepted it, they stopped it from getting there, and instead the FBI wanted to catch the person who was actually ordering this. So what they did is they made their own package and sent this to the PO box, all while an FBI agent was watching the post office this whole time. And guess who turned up to pick up the package? Janie. Janie came and picked up the package and went straight back to work with it. The FBI agents followed her to work and they started questioning her. They started questioning her on the package contents. They asked her what's in it. And she lied, obviously. She said that there's coffee beans in there. She ordered coffee beans. Obviously, the FBI didn't have a bar of this. They said, "We know you didn't order coffee beans. Tell us the truth. What did you order?" So instead, she lied again. She said that she ordered stuff to make beer, like to make homebrew beer. The FBI agents were like, "We know you didn't order that." And they said, "Do you even have stuff at home to make beer, like all the other pieces of equipment?" Janie said no, but she just wants to get into this new hobby. And the FBI said, "Try again. What did you order?" And Janie wasn't going to say. So the FBI just said, "We know you ordered VRSA, which is a biological weapon of mass destruction." And Janie admitted, yes, she did order this. And the reason why she ordered it is because apparently she was wanting to do some science experiments on it. It didn't really make sense. She tried to make it make sense, but it really didn't. And the FBI weren't really getting anywhere with her, so they arrested her. The FBI looked into Janie a little bit further to see if they could get any clues as to why she ordered this. And they found that she had a restraining order against somebody at some point. They also found that she tried to sue somebody for custody of their child. So that gave them a little bit more information that something was going on here. They arrested Janie for ordering the VRSA, because obviously you're not allowed to order stuff like this. And the second thing they did was they went over to Janie's house and they had a search warrant, so they wanted to search her house to see if they could gain any more information. And of course, when they showed up at the house, Rachel opened the door and she was like, why are there FBI agents at the house? She let them all in. They sat her down and they basically told her exactly what had happened, that Janie had done this urgent order for $300 worth of VRSA. And Rachel just said, "Well, there's no way. There's no way. Her best friend of 25 years, she knew her better than this. Why would she order this?" But something clicked inside Rachel. She thought, if Janie could order VRSA online, then she could probably order insulin too. So she asked the FBI whether Janie actually ordered insulin. Lo and behold, she did. She ordered insulin, she ordered MRSA, and she ordered ketamine. So the house was searched and they found the little insulin needles, and those insulin needles had Rachel's DNA all over them. The FBI found that Janie must have administered the ketamine so that this would sedate Rachel enough so that she wouldn't feel the insulin piercing her skin. And the MRSA was used so that Rachel could have the infection after Janie rubbed that mysterious substance on her wound. Since that didn't work, she obviously turned to E. coli, and I think we can all guess what she used for the E. coli when she rubbed that on Rachel's wound. This didn't kill her either, which is why she started using the insulin, because Rachel had mentioned it when they were watching that true crime episode. So it all sort of came crashing down on Rachel as to what was actually happening. It's thought that Janie attempted to kill Rachel on 5 separate occasions. And because of this, she was sentenced to 1 to 20 years in prison. But she actually ended up getting out of prison after only serving 25 months. This means that Janie is now out. She's a free person roaming the streets. She made it very clear that if she ever came out of prison, she was going to come for Ryder and she was going to take Ryder away from Rachel. And thankfully, this hasn't happened, but it's a real fear that I believe Rachel would probably be living with for the rest of her life. That is the story of what happened between Rachel and Janie, who were these inseparable best friends. This case is so shocking to me, and I don't know why, it shook me to my core in terms of trust that you have for people. You just can't really trust anybody. They'd known each other for like 25 years. And Janie turned around and did this horrific thing. She tried to kill her friend. She tried to take her friend's child multiple times. And it just goes to show that you never really know anyone fully and what they're capable of. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for watching if you got all the way to this point. If you found that interesting, then I would love it if you actually left a comment, because I really like reading your comments and your insights as to what you think about all these cases. If there's anything I left out, I'm very sorry. This is actually an episode on one of those Netflix shows. I don't usually do like a Netflix-based true crime story, but this one, it's one of the most interesting ones that I've ever come across, so I just wanted to share it on here because some people just prefer to listen to it. Anyway, thank you for watching. I post every single week, so if you'd like to, subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and I will see you next week. Bye.